This is Jeff Mucci with RCR Wireless News. We're here with Kelley Dunne, who is one of the co-founders of DigitalBridge Communications. Kelley, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
When did you start DigitalBridge Communications, and tell us about some of the events leading up to you coming up with the idea for the company?
Sure, I started DigitalBridge Communications in 2006, early in 2006. I had left Verizon. Verizon had relocated a bunch of executives up to New Jersey, and my family was here, and 3 little girls, and didn't want to move. So with one of the founders of One Point Communications, which we were acquired, Bill Wallace, we were acquired by Verizon, so we ran Verizon Avenue for 5 years, and we decided to stay. And in the 5 years we worked for Verizon, we did a lot of innovative pre-WiMAX, pre-broadband wireless trials and deployments, and I really became fascinated with the advent of 4G, how it redefined business models on serving smaller, underserved communities. What I saw is probably the most capital-efficient technology I'd seen in years. I saw Intel, I saw Craig McCaw and Clearwire and others trying to resonate around a defined ubiquitous spectrum position in 2.5. And I thought that a flat IP wireless environment was not only going to do a lot for mobile broadband, but was going to redefine companies' ability to really serve in a very unique way a mobile personal broadband connection to the end customer. And so that was a premise of DigitalBridge, and we started with the smaller underserved markets, and we launched in 2006.
And fast forward to today, how much money have you raised? Who are some of your investors, and what are some of the key accomplishments of DigitalBridge over the last 4 to 5 years?
Sure.
3 years.
Yeah, so we've raised $90+ million in a combination of debt and equity the last 4 years. It's something we're really proud of if you think back on the last 4 years and the companies that have been able to raise that kind of equity and debt. I also think it's a tribute to the potential broadband wireless has in the industry, and the potential that the capital markets still see in this type of technology and the evolution of mobile broadband. We have 3 principal investors. One is Clark Enterprises, which is Clark Construction. Mr. Clark has a venture fund. Paladin Capital that focuses in a lot of homeland defense funds of, I love their tenet of, we want to invest in companies that make the company stronger, and they saw huge opportunity in redundant wireless networks in markets and cities that would help in that effort. And then the third one is a strategic investor, NRTC, the National Rural Telecommunications Cooperative, and they invested in our B round well over a year ago, and have been a significant partner because they have 1,500 electric co-ops and rural telcos that we have a very strategic relationship with as we look to deploy wireless broadband 4G in the smaller underserved markets in collaborative partnership with these members across the U.S.
How many customers do you have today, and what's the split between residential and commercial?
Sure, and that kind of gets back to your earlier part of your question of significant accomplishments in 4 years. We've got well over 20,000. We're very proud of the fact that we've launched 15 markets. We were one of the first companies to launch 4G in the United States. All our markets are fully mobile markets. We have, I think it's very significant that by the end of June we will have 10 markets EBITDA positive. We've proved out the business case, and we're growing at a very good rate. The other interesting thing is, in the last several months, when we started to roll out dongles and true mobility products, we've really seen a surprising uptick in the demand as you start to redefine that customer experience. And we're seeing, even in our markets, is very similar to what Clearwire is seeing in their markets, is this pent-up demand for mobile, truly mobile personal broadband, a flat IP connection, and we have tremendous take rates from the customers, as well as the bandwidth usage that is matching what Clearwire is seeing in their larger markets. The other thing I'll add is that, one of the things we did differently is, when we started out in 2006, we did an acquisition of a company called T-Town Wireless. So in Idaho, western Montana, and western Wyoming, we had either own or lease all the 2.5. So we have 193 megahertz of spectrum in most of those markets. So that was a great starting position for us. On average, we have 75 to 100 megahertz in every market we're in. And different than other folks at the time, we not only acquired a very strategic spectrum position, but we actually went out and deployed these markets.
What is your flagship product in terms of price point? And you mentioned dongles.
Right.
Are you having to subsidize those, or are people buying the dongles?
No, I think we've seen tremendous downward pricing on CPE. You know, we've always said, and for those of us that were early on, we're waiting for that tipping point of self-install modems to come below $100. Well, that has definitely happened. I mean, one of the things people are surprised at that don't know the depth of what's happening in mobile broadband and 4G, and in particular 2.5 gigahertz globally, is there's been some very significant deployments around the world that have been, you know, tens of thousands of base stations, hundreds of thousands of customers, and what that does is really brings economies of scale to the pricing of both the dongles and the modems. So we see the pricing of the modem from the time we started DigitalBridge to the time what we're paying now is a reduction of probably 70% in CPE cost, and that's really getting to the scale. And so we're to the point where with the dongle product and in some cases a CPE, self-install CPE, the customer can actually just purchase it outright versus a lease arrangement, which we had in the past. And that's, I think, really important because not only the dongle or the self-install CPE, but the netbooks and devices, as more and more devices get out there. I think I recently heard in a conference 2 months ago that there's over 200 SKUs of laptops or netbooks that are WiMAX-enabled laptops and netbooks, and you think about that versus what we were talking about a year and a half ago is amazing. So, you know, really we're at that tipping point and beyond is where you're starting to see these proliferation of devices in the market, and it's really having an impact as the success of these markets.
You mentioned that enterprise customers began adopting the product when you rolled out the dongle.
Right.
What are some of the specific applications that are being used by enterprises that really take advantage of broadband?
So a couple cool examples. Well, first is, you know, any small business owner or medium business owner that has a fleet of vehicles, there's an immediate value contribution there because they think about having this, you know, their fleet of vehicles and their employees have a mobile broadband connection in the areas they serve. Also, when we deploy, we'll deploy clusters of markets. So, you know, we believe that most people, especially in mid to small town America, you know, live, work, and travel within a 90-mile radius of the anchor town. So we'll deploy into not only the anchor town, but the subsequent towns. So I think the number one product is just a mobility access that's a dongle or a netbook-enabled, you know, laptop. I think that's really the key. The second example I can give, which is, you know, a pretty cool one, when we first rolled out, a great example of how I believe this technology is going to stimulate applications and innovation that isn't the carrier, but the customer that comes to the table with those. And the best example I give is when Channel 8 in Idaho Falls did a news story on us when we launched WiMAX. They had a self-install modem that we were showing, and the news camera, after that was done, put down his camera and said, "Hey, can I take a look at that?" So he said, "So you're telling me this is a 2 to 3 megabit connection in all these different towns everywhere you go?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Can I borrow it for a day or two?" Well, the next day they did the first live newscast over a WiMAX self-install modem that replaced their $35,000 satellite truck. So they were able to take the service or take the technology and find an immediate use to actually do news stories in areas of the markets they serve that they normally couldn't afford to because they'd have to rent the satellite truck. And I think that's a fascinating example, and I think you're going to see more and more of that as you start to really see the proliferation of 4G and redefine the customer experience of what it can do and how the service can be used and how the technology can be used.
So whose equipment are you using, and who's making the chipsets for your dongles?
Sure. So we use a combination of Intel chipsets. The Rosedale 2 was our first that we used. We have BSeam is a chipset in our devices. Our RAN provider today is Alvarian. We rolled them out in our first 15 markets. We're currently doing a pretty extensive evaluation for our second technology vendor. And You know, that's another great point, is that we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of forward momentum in the last 6 to 12 months with different entrants coming into the market with not only the RAN architecture, but on the chip side as well as the device side.
Everyone's talking 4G, LTE, and everyone's kind of wondering what happens to WiMAX. What does happen to WiMAX?
Well, I mean, I as an operator am technology agnostic. I mean, you're really focused on delivering the best quality service at the best price per bit to the customer in the most robust manner possible. You know, there's folks that really keep reiterating, I think it's a great point, this is underlying its OFDM technology. So it's not the religious wars of LTE versus WiMAX, I think are not as critically important. I think what is important is WiMAX is here today. It works incredibly well. That's what we're using today. We will continue to evaluate as the technologies evolves, especially on 2.5 where the majority of our spectrum is owned, what opportunities will exist to migrate to a different technology like LTE. I think TD-LTE holds incredible promise for this industry, and I think that's something we always keep a close look at. But for today, we have WiMAX. It's working incredibly well, and that's what we use.
What role do you see Wi-Fi playing, or what role has Wi-Fi played in your business plan in the past, present, and what role do you see it playing in the future?
Well, I think Wi-Fi has a very unique and very important role of a distribution at kind of you got the last mile of WiMAX, where the last several feet in Wi-Fi. A great example of how the interoperability of Wi-Fi and WiMAX is these MiFi hotspots, these personal hotspots.
Yep.
I had the benefit of actually using one in one of our markets at an airport that didn't have broadband connection except for DigitalBridge's connection. And when I set it up and put it down, you could just see people starting to inch over towards me and seeing if they could get on as well. And I could have really resold a Wi-Fi connection. And I think those are the type of things that I think if you think about a quality of service dedicated kind of licensed link back to a base station, but then the ability to distribute that for a variety of devices over Wi-Fi on a very small localized area, that's where you see the power of the two devices. And we're just starting to sell the MiFi devices, and I think there's tremendous promise in these devices as you see those two technologies working pretty closely together.
So how do you envision roaming, data roaming for your customers?
So I think roaming is pretty key. I think roaming is something we're working with Clearwire and others on. I think it is incredibly important to the ecosystem. I think you need to make it very simple for the end user. I think the look and feel and service expectation have to be the same. I also think that the interoperability and the operators working together has to be very easy as well. The benefit of WiMAX, the benefit of 4G, is it's built on an open architecture. So far as we start to think and work through the roaming opportunities, I'm pleased when you think about roaming in the 3G world on what could be done in the 4G world as far as roaming. And I think you'll see a lot more done in the next 12 months in this area, especially in the U.S. and as well as globally.
In closing, what does the future hold for DigitalBridge?
I think it's incredibly exciting. I think we were the little engine that could. We're hopefully about ready to turn into a locomotive. We've learned a ton over the last 4 years, and I think there's tremendous opportunity for us, and especially in the light of success of Clearwire and other global operators, to really redefine how we roll out the next generation networks. I think wireless and broadband wireless holds tremendous promise. I'm incredibly excited that we took the bet early on, that we are where we are, and I think that with our spectrum position, our track record, our success in the markets, we have unlimited potential where we go from here, and it's just an incredibly exciting part of the industry to be into, and an incredibly exciting organization to be part of, and I'm just very proud and thrilled to be a part of it.
Great. Kelley, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.